Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Journal of Radical Wonders monthly reading. We do this on the first Sunday of the month, and in New York, that's 1 p.m. In California, that's 10 a.m. And Eric, I think you accidentally started the screen share there. Let me turn that off. Oh, great. New York, that's 1 p.m. and California, that's 10. And Dave, what time is it in England right now?
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock. Okay, so we're able to make this, not worldwide with this time, but at least including a lot of people. And so this month we're going to be featuring Dave Alcock, who, if you've been reading the Journal of Radical Wonder, he's been on there a lot. We love his work. He's got this absolutely brilliant approach to flash fiction, where it's almost, to me, it feels very much like haiku flash fiction almost, trying to find those moments between moments and really digging deeply into what some people could see as boring, average, every day, but he doesn't. And what he's doing is he's seeing radical wonder. It's doing exactly what we're looking for in the magazine, seeing how it's exceptional, how it's brilliant. And well, without any further, I'll just throw it to Dave.
Super. Thank you, John. And okay, so first of all, thank you, John, to you for the invitation. Thank you, everyone at the Journal, John, because I love what you do. I love the work that I read in it. I'm really grateful for the promotion, so thank you for all of those things. And then all of you as well who've turned up in the audience this evening or whatever time it is for you. Thank you very much. So what I've done is, all of you, I've actually sort of produced, I've got the presentation that I do now. It actually has a title, and I'm calling it A Journey into the Darkness and Light of Ourselves. And the reason I'm giving it a title is because I want to kind of bring it all together. And the reason that I'm calling it that, which I know probably to many of you will sound very slightly grandiose and slightly cliched, possibly even comically so, is that I want to just get to this point to begin with, that stories for me really are journeys. The journey, I see stories really as vehicles which transport us from one state of consciousness to another state of consciousness. In the stories that I write, it tends to be, often a state perhaps of some kind of blindness, some kind of not seeing, to a kind of seeing. That's the journey that my stories tend, I think, to, I hope, take readers on. And I'm hoping that you might see that in some of the stories that I read today. Light, darkness and light, because some of those perceptions are saddening, terrifying, disheartening, heartbreaking, any of those things. Others are heartening, restorative, reassuring and encouraging. So I hope that you might see that in some of the things that I read today. I'd like to begin with a story of mine called Sun Squares. And this one was published by the Cabinet of Heed. Sun Squares. It was almost noon on a Wednesday morning in July, and the year's final weekly meeting of the village toddler group had just taken place in the parish hall. John Littlechild and a handful of other parents from the group's organising committee had just finished packing away and tidying up. The toys and climbing frames had been stacked neatly in the shed, plastic plates and cups washed up and stored. John had swept and wiped clean the floor, and now, since the others had said their goodbyes and left, it was his job to lock up the doors. With his youngest son, Blake, trailing along at his side, John double-checked the fire escape and unhooked the main swing doors. But as he stopped at the doorway, and put his hand in his pocket for the key, he turned around and looked back into the hall. During the summertime, in the morning, when the weather is good, the sun streams down on the parish hall's east-facing wall, and through each of that wall's 3 sash windows, it throws a sloping column of light. On the dark wooden floorboards, it casts 3 slanting yellow rectangles. At first, they are long and reach out almost to the stage at the front of the hall. But as the sun rises and moves west, these bright squares of sunlight shorten and change direction until they strain towards the swing doors at the back. John stood still in the doorway. His eyes settled on the sun squares, and for a moment he considered their change of direction and shape. How strange, he thought. For 4 years I've been coming here, and never before have I noticed them change. Then he looked up at the windows and remembered something he'd forgotten to do. I must just close the curtains, he said to Blake. I'll do this, then we'll both go outside. He walked over to the east-facing wall and pulled 2 sets of curtains shut. 2 of the sun squares vanished, but at the 3rd window, John looked up and stopped. Through the glass, he saw the small grassed garden into which the children often went to play. It was there that they splashed in paddling pools or hurtled on ride-ons down the sloping concrete path. There that they chased and tumbled or looked at insects that lived in the ivy on the fence. As John looked through the window, a look of sadness came slowly to his face. Blake was 4. He'd go to the primary school in September. Their time at the toddler group had come to an end. For a moment, John's eyes closed, and he remembered all the things that had happened in the hall. He saw his children crawling in baby grows, standing and staggering, then sitting upright on chairs. He remembered them climbing in his hands up ladders. He heard them giggling as they slipped down slides. He saw them baking things, and making things, and singing and laughing with their peers. He saw them changing their shape and direction. More clearly than ever, he saw his children growing up. Growing up? John wondered incredulously. He went cold with a feeling of loss. My children have ceased to be toddlers, he thought. The time of their infancy has come and gone. He looked again through the glass at the garden. His throat tightened and his eyes pooled and blurred, and he hesitated, soft with nostalgia, wishing he could live through that special time again. Then a voice groaned wearily from the doorway. Come on, Dad. It's time for us to go. John blinked and swallowed deeply. He took a breath and forced his feelings back down. "You're right," he said, and he drew the final set of curtains, and the last golden sun square disappeared from the floor. He turned around and went quickly through the darkness, and he said, "It's about time we locked up the door." Okay. Right. I want to read one now, which is a little bit different. A lot of my stories are quite scenic, they're quite dramatic. I'm not sure if the one I just read is typical, but some of them are like very small plays. And I think there's one very simple, one good reason for this, which is that it relates to one of my major influences as a writer. My favorite writer is probably John Steinbeck. And he spent a lot of time working on what he regarded as new forms of dramatic prose in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. One of the forms that he experimented with really extensively was what he called the playable novelette. And really, that was prose fiction that could actually be performed on a stage. So when you read something like Of Mice and Men, you can really see that. And there are other really great examples, like The Moon is Down, Burning Bright is another wonderful example. I just love the way that those stories work. I love the way that you get this absolutely incredible blend of description and dialogue and narration, all of these things. I absolutely love the way they work. And I think that's really influenced what I do. So I want to read one now, which is, I think, sort of typical of that. And this one's called Conspirators. And again, it's about looking after small children. Conspirators. "Why not?" he demanded. "Why can't I say things like that?" "Because things like that are hurtful," he shouted. "Things like that should never be said." From outside, there came the rumble of a bus. The engine hummed and faded away. And from the distance came the revving of a motorbike. The exhaust pipe cracked. The engine growled and died. But I was only saying what I felt. I was only telling the truth. What's wrong with that? Her father looked out at the garden and saw the poplar moving about in the wind. He watched the branches swaying back and forth slowly and the silver undersides of the flapping green leaves. "We can't always tell the truth," he shrugged. "Some things we have to keep to ourselves." The girl shook her head and squinted. "So I can think things, but not say them out loud." "Sometimes we have to say nothing. Sometimes we have to say something else." "Something else," she cried bitterly. "Are you telling me I have to learn how to lie?" His eyes were veiled and reluctant, but gently he nodded his head. A draft slipped in through the window and the curtains rose up into the room. Outside, the poplar whisked again and an aerial creaked beside a chimney as it shook. Girl wiped her eyes and looked at the goosebumps that had risen on her knees. "And do all of us have to be so dishonest?" she asked. "Yes," he sighed. "We do." Okay, the next one that I'm going to read is called Transients. And the reason I want to read this one is because it relates to this idea of blending, of description, but particularly actually how really highly poeticized description, I think, can be used actually to balance light and darkness. If you have a really a narrative which is quite grave, quite dark, I think if you balance that with heightened poetic language, you can get this remarkable effect. So it's not an effect which I believe I've yet achieved in my own writing. And it's definitely an effect that I'd love to achieve and that I consider that I'm doing my best attempting to move toward. This is called transience. Transience. As usual, he'd collected her from the station and they were driving through the countryside on their way to the coast. I'm leaving, she said. He glanced at her. Okay, let's make the most of today. He looked through the windscreen at the white van ahead of them and saw the scroll of shadows that raced across the back of it. A telephone mast and a road sign, the gnarled extremities of woodland silhouettes. When they got there, they walked across the cliff tops. They stopped on a headland and looked at the sea. It was blue, and the horizon was misted. Rainbows came and went in the spray above the surf. I wish I could stop the clock, he said. I wish I could keep this from slipping away. A Fulmer soared on an overhead updraft, and the song of a skylark bubbled down through the wind. On their way back, they came to a field gate, and they leaned against it with their forearms on the bar. The hills rolled, and the dark woods bristled, and a buzzard circled above a shining green field. It's beautiful, she said. He nodded. She moved her fingers across the lashes of her eyes. And later, when they went to the beach, they looked at the waves from the water's edge. They gazed as the ocean rippled, as reams reared and light points glittered. They gaped as combers galloped and threw back manes of hissing white mist. He turned. And you can't reconsider. She looked at the skyline. The decision was made. Then she took his arm and placed her head on his shoulder. The breakers pounded and the world seemed to shake. Okay. So far, I've looked at some flashes, and the other form that I write is, of course, is microfiction. So I want to look at some microfictions now. Many of you will know that microfictions are just like any other story. In the same way, they involve this journey, but the journey is accelerated, it's extremely quick. I think like a shooting star, really very quick. And that's what I like to look at now. The first of these stories is called Gaps. Gaps. It wasn't the mizzle that frightened him as he picked his way down to the cove, nor the gale force winds, nor the tide height, nor the surging sea that splashed grey to the cliffs. It was that thing in the gaps, beneath his footholds, that scratched and darted between driftwood and rock, which he told himself could have been an otter but which he knew deep down was a rat. The next one is called Fall. Fall. I remember the sparks of the bonfire, which scattered through darkness like schools of small fish. And I remember the flowing scarves of flame which heated our chests through our damp plastic coats. I remember those dahlias in the sky, our brightening faces, the glittering petals, and later the shivering fingers, the match, and the matchbox as we huddled beside the wood. The burning fuse that raced like a raindrop to the box of danger that I held in my hand. The smiting flash, the light speed excision. I remember the cast. I remember laughing at my stump. It's funny. There's so much I remember. But your words of guidance, I seem always to forget. And this one's called Congeners. A lot of these have been published actually at McQueen's Quinsley. And I'm hugely grateful to Claire for that, Claire McQueen. This one actually, I was really delighted because Claire nominated it for Best Microfiction, which was really was lovely. It was great news for me. Anyway, Congeners. One of them is lying in the dust, close to the fence. The others are facing her. Her eyes are half closed. She looks tired, breathing deeply. The plumes of her chest go up and down. Why is she looking away, I wonder? Why has she turned her back? One of the others comes forward, reptilian legs stalking, thick boned toes stretching, claws pointed as murderers' knives. She advances so slowly, and still the one in the dust looks away. The stalker lowers her shoulders, clucks quietly, indifferently, and pecks. It is a hard peck, an attack. I recoil. And the one in the dust merely blinks. This goes on, and because of the cruelty, I turn away. But I go back. Now, those blinking eyes are closed, and the dead feathers are pale with the dirt, and the stalker is squawking excitedly, and the other ones are gathering around. Maybe they're taking turns now, but the big one is still in charge. The pecking is now a feeding. Each blow is a ravening bite until the stalker takes hold with her beak and begins tugging and ripping from the body, then noisily flapping her wings and rising up in flight with the dead ones springing, uncoiling, intestine dangling pinkly and wetly from her mouth. And in the air now, there is not just this horror, the savage congener and the otherworldly entrails. There is my innocence and my feeling of safety, my childhood trapped as it ceases to exist. Okay. So I don't think that any serious writer will write for long before finding themselves confronted by some fairly startling, sometimes nightmarish, terrifying, or heartbreaking intimations of mortality. The micros that follow, there are 3 of them, were written in those circumstances. The first one is called Seed. Spokes blur, tires thrum, a boy circles his back garden on his bike. His father crouches in frozen horror. A nestling mouths a silent scream where it lies. Its eyes flame. Agony blossoms. Its wings stretch and are still at its sides. Clouds move and overshadow the garden. A floating seed goes dark in the shade. The father turns. His son still circles. A bladed thought cuts a slice through his mind. I'm just going to read one now called Equanimity. Equanimity. Swaying as the ambulance carves corners, its wheels bruising tracks on the newly gritted roads. His son far away, his heart still pounding. He imagines falling flakes, a white world, a yellow moon. Home. His voice is desperate. Please, will you take me? He won't agree, won't consent. He knows it's close, that nothing can stop it. The room is a noose. He just wants to run. There's an envelope on the overbed table. You can take it. It's signed, he says. At the door, his son looks and pauses, nods and smiles. Love flames in his eyes. Before the blooded body, before the rushing of doctors, before all the alarms that blare like World War III, he speaks final words, gasps quickly. I'm going under. A hand holds his arm. It is impossible to breathe. Cul-de-sac, bungalow, kitchen, morning paper delivered, radio alarm come and gone, on a doily, on the worktop, the week's drugs neatly organized. Objects keep sparking with an immortal wish to live. Okay. Okay, so I want also now just to conclude the reading with some slightly different stories. Not all stories end with tragedy and loss. Some end with resurgence. So those resurgences may be minor, they may be momentary, they may be imagined, they may simply be perceived, but they are resurgences nonetheless. So I'd like to end with just 4 short stories about that. First one was published at the Journal of Radical Wonder, and it's called Persephone. Persephone. Like the snowstorm that blows inside an opal, turned to a liquid and dripping from her hand. She rubs the sheen with the tips of her fingers. Her eyes center, her mouth opens. She sees. The bits move, they glide in circles. A ball of colors unfolds on her skin. The rainbow arches, the hues keep descending, pigments keep streaming through smiling lines in her cheeks. Okay, this one is called Want. All of my stories have got one-word titles, and I know that this is not really the done thing. Claire McQueen published this one, and she gave it a different title. And I know it's a better title. She gave it the first line of the poem. However, I simply can't get away from those one-word titles, and so I call it Want. She calls it For the Errand That Brings Us Together. Want. For the errand that brings us together, for the history that must have come before, for this small corridor and its unexpected privacy, for the half-darkness that holds us in its arms, for our proximity as we meet beside the fire door, for the wanted notice that I see in your eyes, for the wall behind us that catches our shoulders, for our bending knees that let us slide to the floor, for our lips' impatience and our tongue's authority, for the rushing knowledge that everything has changed, for our perception of our actions' rightness, for our escape from refusal and thought, for my hand's freedom and your knees' separation. I thank you for all of this, and I gratefully accept. Okay, and then the penultimate story is called Lorikeets. And this one's going to be published in the next issue of McQueen's. I was really pleased about that. The general theme of that issue is about things that are fun. I'm not sure if this is fun, but it's definitely about hope and possibility. Lorikeets. Look up, and you may see it. A screen of brightly coloured birds that flushes through the treetops like a psychedelic wind. Here, where the sky is grey and the leaves fall thin and yellow, where wet mud slips beneath a worn-out shoe sole and a toe squeaks inside a waterlogged sock, where a foot aches and a body is powerless, where a neck creaks and stiffens and rebels. Beyond the high street, beyond the traffic, the pavements, beyond the markets, the arcades, the stalls, beyond the people, beyond the gate, beyond the entrance, beyond the memories, beyond the grief and despair, where hope fails and vision is flightless. Look up. Lorikeets, they be there, with bibs, red as volcanic lava, with faces purple and frosted as plums. with feathered wings, green as ripe avocados. Look up. Lorikeets may be there. And finally, I'd like to read this story, things like this, which is a very short flash. Things like this. The shelf in the riverbed was behind them, and so was the roar of the rough white water. The river was now almost motionless. It was glassy and gliding and calm. Paul watched the current as it slid round a boulder and marked the river's brim with a spinning silver stream. He saw the mirrored trees going down through the waterway toward the blue sky beneath a mass of green leaves. Then his daughter's voice came shrilly from behind him. What is it? She pointed at the path. Paul's head swung round from the river. His eyes squinted, came open, and he smiled. It's a shrew, he said amusedly, and all four of them stepped forward to have a look. The handful of grey fur moved deliberately across the woodland footpath. It hurried past some fallen brown oak leaves and stopped beneath some ferns on the wayside bank. The children squatted in front of it. They watched it clean its fur in the shadows beneath the leaves. I think it's a vole, whispered Angela. Maybe, said Paul. I've never seen one as closely as this. It climbed up the bank in front of them, traversed a ledge, and disappeared down a hole. Paul straightened up and frowned. Slowly, he shook his head. I saw one once before, he mused. Many years ago. I spent the whole of one summer looking for it. He paused. I only ever saw it at once. He turned again from the bank beside the footpath and looked through the trees to the wide brown river. You can spend the whole of your lifetime looking, he said quietly. But you won't see anything unless you get some good luck. His eyes moved over to a sunbeam, which broke on a wind wave into a galaxy of stars. Then the little boy stood up. He turned and looked searchingly at Paul. But we are lucky, aren't we, Dad? Aren't we lucky to see things like that? Paul turned, and his face was in shadow, but the glints sharpened in the sockets of his eyes. A ray of light that pierced the treetop above him and his family were brilliant in a yellow shaft of light. Yes, we are, he agreed. And he looked altered. Then he took the boy's hand, and they set out again along the path.
Oh, thank you so much, Dave. That's wonderful.
Glad you enjoyed it, John.
It's great. Do you have anything coming out soon that we can buy?
Pardon?
Do we have any? Do you have anything coming out soon that we can buy? Help support?
No. It's. I think there's a possible collection, John, that I could. I think I've got enough material now to put it together and into some sort of collection. So I think perhaps now that process can begin. That process of looking for a publisher and thinking about that. I think there's enough there, and it's coherent enough, I think.
Well, I just heard on Facebook that Rose Metal Press is about to open up again, and they're wonderful. So any of you write
Okay.
novellas in Flash?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That'd be a
Yeah.
great one. Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
What is it? Which one is it, John?
Rose Metal Press.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So Michael Loveday is on that, and other people like him.
I think the
Okay.
brevity books are from that press too.
Oh yeah.
Cynthia Moore's books were published through Rose Metal Press.
Well, that's really interesting to know. Thanks, John.
All right. Well, okay. So now we're going to move on to the open mic. And if you didn't get a chance before, just put your name in the chat, and if you'd like to join, I skipped you or something. I think I'm gonna start it with Gravy by Raymond Carver. Do y'all know Raymond Carver? Do y'all know Gravy? One of my favorite poems ever. Gravy. No other word. Sorry. Gravy. No other word will do, for that's what it was. Gravy. Gravy these past 10 years. Alive, sober, working, loving, and being loved by a good woman. 11 years ago, he was told he had 6 months to live at the rate he was going, and he was going nowhere but down. So he changed his ways somehow. He quit drinking, and the rest? After that, it was all gravy, every minute of it, up to and including when he was told about, well, some things that were breaking down and building up inside. Don't weep for me, he said to his friends. I'm a lucky man. I've had 10 years longer than I or anyone expected. Pure gravy, and don't forget it. That's a gorgeous poem. I love that poem. Okay, so our first, remember the rules of the open mic, 3 minutes or, I'm sorry, 3 poems or 5 minutes, whichever comes first. So you don't want to be the person who's going on for 10 minutes. Otherwise I'll have Tom Thomas stop you. I certainly don't want to. So our first reader is Lee Ellen.
There, how's my sound? Okay?
Good.
Good.
Right, okay. Age is just a number when it comes to love. There are magic numbers that exist in religions, formulae, and codes to gather power and cast spells. Magic numbers abound in chemistry to measure stability of neutrons in the hearts of atoms. There are magic numbers for aging cheese, fermenting wine. There are magic numbers for the number of minutes to bake a scone, steep some tea, soft boil an egg. For the age of a compatible lover, I have always liked 24. And then I have I guess it's a very short story, or I'm not sure what it is, but it's entitled Cockroach. Glasses on so I can get some distance from it here. In 1958, I moved into a mostly furnished apartment in an old Victorian house in a time-worn neighborhood. It had been an elegant house in its day. Cut glass windows, trim, beautifully grained sliding pocket doors, closing off the parlor from the dining room, a bowling lane in the basement. I lived there when I met and married my husband. The place was tidy in a dusty, antique way, no bugs or rodents. The new tenants moved in upstairs. They brought their roaches with them. Their invasion began. A few roaches wandered in and settled in my apartment. Complaints to the landlord yielded hearing his own roach horror stories. He gave unwanted details about picking up pails of garbage outside the new tenant's door, their roaches crawling up his arms. He sprayed the whole building several times. The roaches returned with flanks of reinforcements. At night, we could hear a roach drop from the bedroom ceiling and bounce off the floor. It got so bad that once when we opened our door and turned on the lights of the apartment, we heard the whoosh of bands of roaches running away. We had to move. And how to move without transporting our roaches to the new place? I called an exterminator. An egg case has 48 eggs. In other words, he explained, every time you see a roach, it has 47 siblings hiding in its neighborhood. They sold us roach powder and detailed the process for its application. Place the powder in every baseboard of the new apartment before moving in. Transfer no overstuffed furniture. Buy a new bed mattress. Nothing untreated to be taken directly from the infested apartment to the new one. All furniture to be dusted with the anti-roach powder. All furniture, drawers, dressers, chests of drawers, etc., must be emptied, dusted with powder. Contents carefully inspected and treated, washed or dry cleaned before taken to the new place. All objects, utensils, books especially, examined and treated before being taken, being boxed and moved. It was a very difficult and extensive process, but we did it. We made our last inspection of the new empty apartment before moving in. There, on the bedroom hardwood floor, lay one dead roach. I burst into sobs. Had we somehow transported the enemy into our new place? Our 47 living sibling roaches in the building, in this apartment, waiting for us to move in? I called the pesticide company. He simply said, "It's dead, isn't it?" Since that day, I have never knowingly lived with a roach.
That's great. All right, thank you. Next up is Thomas.
Okay, time me, John.
Yeah.
I just have one. The girl you marry is clustered with her family, her history, the boys she knew, and not just the girl you sat with on the porch that night as you weaved your dreams like your fingers interlaced.
That's great.
I was never the enforcer, John.
That's how I think of you, though. Next up is Tiffany.
All right. So sorry, I had another thing open. Here I am. So I have a couple that I'm going to read. The first one I just recently wrote. I'm terrible with titles and it doesn't have a title yet. I pray for moonbeams on still nights to wake you only softly, for embers hot and pulsing on your hearth, for shallot fried crisp and crumbled over meals prepared by sure hands, for those hands to cradle yours and feel nothing but love, for shorelines in spring sparkling emerald under your feet. And even if I never look into your eyes, and even if I never caress your fingers, and even if I never feel your name velvet my lips, I pray for endless surprises that bring you joy, for kisses that linger, and for love, only love, and never regret. Second one I'll read is a short piece called Pepper. Lingering puppy breath in my hair, vision of closed eyes, limp legs and spot nose under my chin, eyes that never saw sunlight playing through pepper branches. He rests now under the roots. And one last one was here somewhere. Okay, first grade recess. I forget the common name again, the name people call the bone my best friend Zane was missing. the bone between his heart and the rest of the world, the reason we weren't allowed to push him on the playground. But Ryan did. Ryan, who knew that Zane's sternum was missing, that if his heart came into contact with a hand or a ball or the ground, it could stop. I reached out for Ryan and grabbed his arm and bit as hard as I could, and I tasted blood. Later in the principal's office, I stared at the wooden board hanging from a strap, holes drilled at intervals to increase pain, stared at shared history, knowing all too well the feeling of being beaten, and I apologized for nothing.
All right. Next up is Sarah.
Okay. Sorry. So I'm going to read two poems from that Strapless Bra in Heaven, which John had reviewed for, what did you review it for?
I think it was Cultural Daily.
Yes, for Cultural Daily. Okay. And the book came out just as the world collapsed, so you may not have heard these. Hatred is a death threat. Ceres' rich aunt am I. Clap twice and I'll start the coffee or make the girl get it done. A model home of the future am I. A dream acquisition. The bungalow they sold you on wanting. Resistance is an educated guess. A straw breaking backs of caravan owners, but not owners of caravan owners. Please, not the camels. Hatred is a death threat, not an imperative, a consequence, not an inevitability. We who shed tears clap twice and twice more for the light to shine itself in the unnavigable dead end. If there is a way out, tell me, Siri, or join me. Tarnish the obelisk, admit of the body, don't resist it, and do start the coffee. And then the second one, thank you. What an arroyo can do. I don't know what's happening to my voice all of a sudden. What an arroyo can do. It is possible for an arroyo to hold water, just as a gutter, one of its definitions, can, but mine is high in the desert and dry as scorn. The sun baked long suffering into that dirt. That's what an arroyo is. A gully of dirt, the color of old pottery and scrub. Like a god scattered a burden of wild straw and told it to dig deep into the color of acceptance, make roots, start a family. This is home, the wild straw said, as it clung to the land, not at first, but after so many cycles of skies talking blue streaks to nights, then the scrub made friends, fell in love. I was drinking when I fell into an arroyo. Scrub raked my hand like a rancher if he thought I was after his daughter, unless he hoped for a daughter-in-law. Opinion Tree ordered the scrub to resist my pull. Stay grounded. You know, when we think stars are trembling, it's the constellations laughing. I saw them. I was on my back. The stones, which I haven't even introduced, snarled at dirt and scrub to ignore me. No one argues with stones. Thanks.
All right. I put the link to Sarah's book in the chat.
Yeah.
Absolutely recommend buying it. It's a great book. Okay, up next is Ken.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. So I've been working on a series of what I call fireflies. And fireflies are probably the favorite writing I do. And I got to thank a bunch of people for that. And then the main one, of course, is Tom Thomas, who publishes them, and John. And there's a bunch of people here, Kate, a batch of you who have been part of this. And I've just enjoyed the heck out of it. And so I've launched on another one. And this one isn't complete. The Firefly series has a doom and gloom newscast. and then a short tercet to shake off that spell, and then presents a story which is a sort of a glow in the dark, a moment of saying, hey, you know, shift your perception a little bit. There's still bunches that can be seen. And so this morning I ran across this newscast that just really begged description. And so I'm gonna read that. This doesn't have the short tercet, and it doesn't have the firefly that comes after it. This is just the newscast, which I think is particularly dark. So I'm sorry to have to follow Dave, who presents these wonderful, wonderful stories of hope, and this one doesn't have any, because I haven't gotten to that part yet. Anyway, this is Today News from Jacksonville, and it's regarding Madonna and Child with St. John the Baptist and St. Magdalene, which was painted in 1495. A high school principal in Florida today made headlines by banning his teachers from including a painting, Madonna and Child with St. John the Baptist and St. Mary Magdalene, 1495, in their curriculum. He declared the early Renaissance work an assault on family values and a, quote, partisan attack on the pro-life movement because the Virgin Mary doesn't look happy enough. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, while admitting to not having read the Bible, supported the move, pointing out that Mary Magdalene looks like a hooker. The history teacher, who had planned to include the image in his lecture on pre-1800 artists, posted on his website, "You just can't make this stuff up." The teacher was subsequently fired. There you have it. And that's enough doom and gloom for today. Thanks.
All right, I dropped Ken's book in the chat as well, Fireflies Against Darkness. So great. Next up is Raymond, and I'm going to put Raymond's book in the chat too. If you love fantasy, you love Raymond's work.
Hello.
Hey.
Give me a second. I had the poems up, but I lost them. Okay, so I have three. One of the poems is in my book 100. That's on Amazon, and the other two are not. So I'll read the first one from the book. Glass. I'm picking up my heart in shattered pieces on this concrete floor. The dial tone like the humming of death coming for her. Please pick up, flittering through the Rolodex of my mind. Mat, sheet, and blanket sending shivers down my spine. I close my eyes so the hours will pass, looking down on the floor to see the still beating mass. Today I became like glass, easily broken. That's that one.
Oh,
The
you
next
got one.
one-
Okay.
The next one is called Lamentations of the Heart. Laying on the cold floor, phone in my hand, and a heart full of anger. How you would sing a song of friendship, then leave me worse than you would leave a stranger. These tears ain't for you as my heart becomes frigid. You take my love for what we created and treat it as if something to play with. So now I'm waiting for the police to call me back, staring at the spinning ceiling fan. How I long to hear my children's voice, but the voicemail I keep getting over and over again. Yeah, those two poems I have wrote. First one was when I went to jail with a situation between me and my kid's mother. And then the second one was another situation where I came home from work and she was gone with the kids and I didn't know where they were. So I had to call the police to find out where they were. And then this last one I wrote years ago. It's called Sobriety. Faded farewell. It feels like this is destiny. only the essence of a queen standing next to me. I lost it all like a bad hand of poker. Time is relative, but when you're high, time seems to pass you by. A decade of living, a decade of sinning, dedicated to pushing you away. With every toke of the smoke, inhale and then choke, I'm elevated. Emotions are bumper cars, my reason for staying intoxicated. So I won't have to feel what apparently is real, killing my brain cells with every pop of a pill. So I become complacent. I can't even tell the difference. If I'm high all the time, I cannot even tell when I'm high. So I'm trying to find my way back to you. But all this drama I'm going through got me missing you. And I'll admit, I used liquor and drugs as an outlet for a little while, but in the process lost everything that was worthwhile. My family, my friends, even my mother. With my back against the wall and no one in my corner, I asked myself, who am I on the drunken night? I right therefore I am, myself replied. You ain't really living if you always high. Your head may be in the clouds, but your body's on the ground. It's supposed to be the other way around. Sobriety. That's it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Raymond. And again, one of his books is there in the chat. Next up is Carrie. All right, Carrie, are you up for it?
I'm up for it. All right. So this is an excerpt from my memoir in Flash. It's called Christmas with Lucy. Northridge adolescent psych ward, 17, locked up again. Woke up in a Pepto-Bismol pink room. The day before, my hospital roommate, Lucy, had found out she was pregnant by her dad. When Lucy slept, she looked so much younger than 14, too young to be motherless, with no home to look forward to going back to, just a shelter for women and children that she had been assigned to by the state of California. I shook her awake. It's Christmas. Lucy sat up in her bed. She blinked twice. Doesn't mean anything to me. I got you something. I handed her a lumpy package wrapped in notebook paper and Scotch tape. How? Lucy asked. It's something of mine, I said. I want you to have it. She tore open the paper and took a breath. A pink bra from Victoria's Secret, lacy and demure. Are you sure? She asked. It's so nice. I nodded. It's my best one. How do I put this on? She asked. You've never had a bra before? It's my first, Lucy said. I didn't tell her I'd noticed, like everyone on the unit, that this was something she needed. I took off my misfit shirt and my bra. She stood and reached up, pulling her pajama top over her head. I inhaled the aroma of unwashed teenage girls. I pulled my bra out long, stretched it around my back, one end in each hand. Hook it in the front, then turn it to the back. Slip your arms in the loops and voila. Lucy struggled a bit with the hook, so I helped her, then adjusted her straps. It has a little room. That's good, I said. Your boobs will get bigger. My nipples sure are, Lucy said. They're like pepperonis. I laughed, pulling my shirt back on. Lucy did the same, smoothing her chest. How do I look? Pretty, I said, grown up. No one's ever said I was pretty before. I walked toward the door. Let's go check our stockings. I had the harebrained idea to tape our striped gym socks to the door. Sure enough, they sat on the floor, filled with hospital toiletries, lotion, deodorant, and shampoo. I looked over at the nurse's station to see the RN who sat on our bed at night for girl talk, the one who kept me safe as I shaved my legs. She wore a Santa hat over her long blonde hair. I remembered how I believed in Santa after I lost my virginity, because my mom said if I didn't believe, I wouldn't get any presents. I clutched my sock with nothing left to lose, longing for something to believe in that no one could ever take away. That's it.
Thank you so much. Up next is Karen.
Thank you, John. These have been wonderful readings, very enjoyable. This is a flash fiction, and it's called Virus. The crowd has ballooned by the time we arrive. Mathieu does his wheelie thing, a Cirque du Soleil improv. The multitudes are mesmerized, buzzing with excitement as the rhythmic hammering of the cymbalum and snaking of our oboe arpeggios enchant, leading attention astray. I rifle through pockets and half-zipped purses, filling my pouch with every nugget I can pilfer. Sifting through the loot will come later. The crowd gasps and laughs with nervous delight as Mathieu wheels atop the unicycle, weaving to and fro, losing his balance, threatening to crash into onlookers, and recovering within the very last inch with nothing to spare, thrilling the crowd. The quartier is a mix of exhilaration and danger. Danger when the first onlooker reaches into their bag to retrieve their coin purse, their iPhone, their keys. Their shrieks no longer register pleasure. The pitch a little higher, a little thinner as their breath is dislocated in their chest, gasping and hyperventilating in panic. One after the next goes off like a pop toaster, catchy like a virus. That's it.
Great. Karen, are you the writer of the Group of Seven?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to put that in the chat. I thought you were.
Thank
Excellent.
you so much.
So check that out. Next up is Guy.
Hi. By the way, I'm sitting under a ramp, and if you hear a squeaking, groaning sound, it's this ramp over my head because we're afloat. I oiled it, but there you go. This one's called Dreaming Backwards. It was also published by Claire McQueen. I'm editing a friend's 354-page manuscript for the 9th time, and I still catch 67 mistakes. I'm reading it backwards to keep from understanding anything besides a typo. Last night I dreamed backwards. You were in bed with someone else, a large and hairy but fit man, a Spanish colonel maybe. But I wasn't jealous or anything. He got out of bed backwards, walked backwards to the bathroom, flushed the toilet, then did his business, showered, put on a disheveled suit, and walked backwards out of the bedroom, down the stairs. Pretty impressive. The door slammed, the car backed out of the driveway and drove down the street in reverse. It started getting lighter. Your eyes were on me. Half hidden by the curtain, I had the feeling we were married, or were gonna be, but I knew someone was coming. The thing that stayed with me was all that hair on his legs. I've never been a hairy guy, but maybe it wasn't too late. I woke up this morning older and hairier in places than I've ever been. I looked at the manuscript, at its hidden typos, and retraced my steps to the bathroom where I flushed first, feeling like I had been here before. That's the way writing has always worked for me. And I have one more little micro, and it came from a book of 1-inch punch fiction that I wrote, and it's called Free Verse Departure. Poets bring nothing to the party. They don't even ask. They show up on time or late, they get lost. They say they're coming, but don't. Then they arrive in time for food, stand in a corner and drink, never take off their coat. They'll strip to a t-shirt, talk about Bird, things you've never heard as Parker plays on your Alexa. And sometimes poetry breaks out. Someone picks up a guitar, there's action on the roof, shy cats come out of hiding. An enormous radish gets carved into art. Memory floats up from an afternoon in Oaxaca, 1984. Then the houseboat rises and warms, and everyone leaves all at once in a free verse departure, sink full of dishes. Someone leaves a hat. The night itself becomes a poem. And guess what? That's what the poets brought.
That's great. And did you write Edible Grace?
I did.
Okay, well, here that is. Okay, next up is Bill.
Thank you. I'm enjoying these readings immensely. This one was in Milk Candy Review back in January, and it's part of a novella in Flash that's still in progress. It's called Grand Canyon 1967. Write a story about my beautiful mother, a petite, light-skinned Puerto Rican with dark hair and shocking green eyes. Write about her nervous breakdown. Write about the doctor recommending she terminate her latest pregnancy, that he knew somebody who could do it discreetly and safely, for more money than she had saved, more than Dad made in a month, and how he would never permit it anyway. Talk about RH incompatibility, but try not to sound clinical about it. Talk about a wife's duty to her husband. Talk about the abomination of contraception. Have a scene where she makes the mistake of confiding in the wives of the church elders, where she's told only God holds the reins of life and death, and she's made to feel like a sniveling idiot. Write about the impromptu trip to visit friends in Arizona, just an hour north of the Mexican border. How her friends figure out her plans and drag her back to Jesus. Tell us about her fourth fruitless labor and how she added this stillborn's name to the others in the family Bible, as if they would grow up, move away, and simply forget to call. Show us how her green eyes dulled, how her mind went places we could not go. Yes, write a story about my beautiful mother, then tell it from her young son's point of view. Highlight the epic road trip without Dad. Include the greasy roadside stands, the sing-alongs with the radio, the bugs swarming motel lights, the friendly strangers who talked funny, how flat and tedious America was, the promise of the desert after rain. Write of the son's disappointment at cutting the trip short, about the drive north before heading home, and how he stood at the south rim of the Grand Canyon and watched his beautiful mother weep at God's perfect creation.
Fantastic.
Thanks.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Okay. Are you sure?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. Up next, we have Andrew Turner, who is the founding editor of the East Jasmine Review, which is a great place to send your work if you write poetry or flash fiction. So, and they happen to be open for submissions right now. I'll drop that in. All right, Andrew.
We also take nonfiction too, so we do all of it. I'm going to read two things today. One's a poem and one's a story, and you all can hear me, right? Okay. So the first one is going to be Eelgrass, which John is going to be publishing in 19 days on Journal of Radical Wonder. So you can see it with some absolutely gorgeous art by Anne Brantingham. So here we go. Eelgrass. Eelgrass dances under meniscus, slow, methodical, and I want to undulate to their rhythm, fall under the siren song, float careless of everything, save the moon's pull. All right. And I'm not as short of a writer as Thomas, but I am also not known for my my lengthy works. So the next one is going to be from a short story collection I'm working on called A Picture of Dorian Gay, just because it's kind of funny. And this is this I think was published by Worthing Flash, I want to say. I think it was last year. And this is Vitiligo. Dorian traced the edges of Nathan's continents, marveled at how the coastlines of white met smooth butter darkness. Nathan sighed, content, half asleep on their shared bed, the morning light turning Nathan into both golden and impossibly dark radiance. Dorian moved from the island on Nathan's chest to the archipelago trailing his jaw, exploring the difference with his eyes while fingers swam the supple continuity of smooth skin. Nathan smiled, but took Dorian's hand and held it still. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Up next is Eric Barr, and you should check out his website. I'll drop that in the chat in a minute. He's a interesting theater performer. I don't even know how to say it, Eric. And he writes and acts about his plays about a stroke. And so, Eric.
This is from, I'd like to read a poem. It's from a collection that is not yet published called Striking Back Post-Stroke Poetry. But I hope it will be published soon. It's called Sunset Walk. On tonight's unsteady sunset walk, the crows squawked, the crickets chirped, and even the birds were screaming at me to fall and die, to provide a bigger meal than the roadkill rabbit at the end of the drive. Oh, here I come. And this is called Mornings. I start each day sitting at the front window, staring down the driveway, hoping the past or future will drive up and visit. But I end up sitting alone, me with my coffee, the dog with her bone. What could the past tell me? What would I like the future to say? You didn't screw up too badly, and at least you have today. Thank you, John. I have a family call at 11:30, so I'm going to split. Thank you so much, everyone. It was great.
Thank you. And we have one final reader and one of my favorite people. She's got a book coming out in December, is it? You're on mute.
Our book, yes. The end of the year, I'm not sure exactly what. Yeah, December probably. Yeah.
And co-written by me, so you should buy it 3 times.
That's right. It's called My Dead.
All right.
It's cheerful. All right. I'm going to share an image that goes with this. I'm doing, this is from my memoir, which is called The Fine Art of Grieving. And it's a little excerpt that's, anyways, I'll share the photograph. Let's see. There we go. All right, can you all see that?
Yep.
Okay. This is called Same Place. Same place. Loss changes as life changes, continually evolving. As an artist and photographer, I had trained my eyes to notice what would make an extraordinary image, a portrait, abstraction, still life, or landscape. I learned the language of shapes, contrast, the play of light and shadow, and the nuance of color, the deep images, the ones I created to understand the human condition, I discovered by dancing with the subject, searching for whatever imbalanced me on the fulcrum of stability. The last photographs I had taken of Nanda, the photographs were Polaroids in the backyard that late September, the last time I saw him alive. Were not given much aesthetic consideration. The pictures were quick snapshots meant for his girlfriend, Carmen. Polaroids have a short lifespan. They fade quickly. Details deteriorate, but the results are instant. I could make shiny squares of Nanda in 20 seconds. We planned to take quality photographs using film in my fancy camera when the family gathered at Christmas. A year later, same time, same place, sunlight flooded the backyard as it did that day. For the first time since his death, I mulled over those Polaroids, how precious they had become. To revisit the past, I walked through the yard and placed his portraits in the exact locations where he posed. I noticed the bougainvillea, once a full bloom backdrop of magenta flowers, had dried as brown as the fence. Ivy had overgrown, taking the honeysuckle with it. The old ladder was missing, The bucket, the hose, the garden hoe were gone. Broken stepping stones had been replaced with new ones. Our pink camellia bush, not visible in those Polaroids, had risen out of the earth to peek through our bedroom window. The last photo in my hand had no place to go, a photo of Nanda on a swing suspended from our oak tree, his elbows resting in his lap, his face soft as butter. Someone cut down the tree swing, so I nestled the edge of the photo in pine needles to lean up against the tree. In a split moment, the grief amnesia wore off. The world once shrunk to the size of a plum, impossible to hold on to navigate, to see clearly, began to expand and came into focus. I had thawed, and the details of an entire year of living, moving on without me, entered my view. Sometimes we are on hold. I needed to be stuck to be more careful, to slow down time, not take anything for granted, to be mindful as to what can't be undone. All that time, I believed the Polaroids rooted Nanda in place, but his images told me the place had changed and he had moved on. Those deteriorating photos of Nanda, wrinkled and colors bruised, along with the backyard shifting, informed me to relish the truth, the incredible, clear, glorious truth. Nothing remains the same, not even grief. Unstuck, I vibrated into the whirl of perpetual change with urgency to step back into life, to observe, to be witness, willing to take the invitation to continue the photo session with Nanda, to take his place. I went in search of Nanda's clothes and found the slacks and shirt he wore that day. As I secured the pants buttoned to my waist, my hips became his, surprised to find the pants a perfect fit. His shirt, a bit loose, held my shoulders. From the file cabinet, I collected the Polaroid XX70 camera, the tripod, the packages of film, untouched since our last visit, the film possibly unviable, and headed to the backyard. Swinging on an emotional pendulum, I examined each Polaroid of him, his gestures, body language, positioned the camera, set the timer, hopped into each place, and tried to be him. I photographed myself in those places, surprised to find the new Polaroids would be the start of a new relationship to Nanda, to who we were, who I was, who I would become. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you all open readers and listeners, and thank you, Dave. We have a poetry reading every month on the first Sunday, and we have craft talk every month on the third Sunday at the same time. So I hope you can join us. Also, please submit to the Journal of Radical Wonder.
Yes.
I will see you next time.
All right. Bye.